President Obama's speech to thousands on the National Mall today on the 50th anniversary of the March on Washington. It both paid tribute to those who gathered in front of the Lincoln Memorial in 1963 and cast a hopeful eye towards the future.
They dared to dream differently, to imagine something better. And I am convinced that same imagination, the same hunger of purpose, stirs in this generation. Change does not come from Washington, but to Washington. The change has always been built on our willingness to take on the mantle of citizenship. You are marching.
President's speech and the day as a whole. Columnist for the Washington Post, Clinton Yates, host of NPR's Tell Me More, Michelle Martin, and columnist for USA Today, Dwayne Wickham. Thanks for being here, guys. Michelle, let me just start off. General reaction to the president's speech. Some people thought he may give a more personal speech, talk about what this day means to him. We didn't really hear that so much.
You know, with all due respect, John, I don't think it was about him. I don't think the day was about him. I think he had the grace to recognize that. I think that the soundbite you picked to introduce this segment was absolutely the right one.
Thank you.
I think that people feel that, you know, perhaps the president is being a little too cool for school, but I think that he was reflecting his philosophical and firmly held belief that movements really are about the people and not about individuals like him.
Clinton, you wrote a terrific piece about the fact that your father, who was in Washington 50 years ago, skipped the speech, didn't go to the speech. He went to work instead for perfectly valid reasons right now, but I think he was 19 at the time. It made me wonder, what do you think 19-year-olds today, 19-year-old African-American young men, what did they want to hear from the president today, and did they hear it?
I think that gets back to the point you made about something being more personal. I think you probably wanted to hear something that made you think, hey, this is for me. This country is for me. I think that was a big part of what he was trying to explain when he brought up the fact that the goal of the civil rights movement wasn't just to make more blacks millionaires. It was to give people opportunities. And not everybody is trying to be a millionaire. There are some people that just want to know that they have a shot in this society. And that was something that I don't know that he addressed as well as he could have, but he did make an attempt to go.
He did. He talked about economic disparity. He talked about the fact there's still a long way to go in spite by some of these measurements. Dwayne, again, you wrote a very interesting piece, critical in a way of the last week about some of these commemorations, saying they missed the mark, that they're not talking about the issues that you think are most important to African Americans. Please explain.
Well, I think they spent too much time talking about things that have passed. They talked about Trayvon Martin. It was a tragic case. But we kill in this country each year 8,000 African Americans, most of it black on black crime. That's a catastrophe that has to be addressed.
But can I just speak on that for a minute? Just talking to this question of the president speaking in personal terms, I think we all know he has paid a very heavy political price when he has chosen to do that. I think your question was about young African-American men. I think he's done that repeatedly in recent weeks and months. I think his comments about Trayvon Martin, where he has spoken very personally about that. He's paid a price with that with a certain group of people, particularly a certain group of white conservative pundits who have apparently not appreciated his remarks. But I think I can say with some conviction that a lot of the people he was speaking to, young African-American men and the people who love them, have very much felt that he has spoken to their pain and their concerns very directly.
There are some
This
people,
is not the only occasion in which this has to happen. So.
Well, but there are people, not just whites, critics who you point out, who do say the president should be speaking more about race. Colin Powell said as much over the weekend.
No, my point was that white conservatives, a number of white conservative pundits, have criticized the president for speaking about race. They say he shouldn't be talking about it at all. And I understand that there are other people. Colin Powell is an interesting person to be making this point, has said he should talk more about it. I think we all know the president has to walk a fine line on this.
Did he walk that fine line, or did you miss the mark today?
Just to answer your question before I cede the floor, I will say that I think the president was doing today what progressives have been trying to do for decades, which is to link the destinies of white, less advantaged people with African-American less advantaged people or people of color who are less advantaged, to link their destinies, to point out in which they have shared destiny, in which the country has a shared stake in improving the lot of life of all people in this country. I think that's what his intention was.
The president went to a place where visionaries spoke to commemorate what he had said. I mean, his vision, King's vision, was the vision of a visionary, someone who looked into the future and hoped for the best. The president's job today was to talk really politics. He delivered a political message. He tried to translate the vision into political terms.
I liked what he brought up when he brought up the Iron Curtain, and he also brought up apartheid, which, in using those two struggles and in indicating those two words alone, he made the point that, look, the problem with American society is big. It's not just one that we can sort of say, oh, it isn't there. And I think that a lot of people sort of try to overlook it. But when you talk about apartheid and you talk about the Iron Curtain, you have to take it a lot more seriously by default. And I think that was a good job. He sort of broadened it out in terms of the global concern about what's going on.
Let me talk about politics, as Dwayne brought this up here. There was another speaker, another president, who addressed politics directly. Bill Clinton, in a way, tied Martin Luther King to what's going on in Washington right now. I wonder if we can listen to that quote.
Martin Luther King did not live and die to hear his heirs whine about political gridlock. It is time to stop complaining and put our shoulders against the stubborn gates holding the American people back.
I think a lot of people sat up straight when they heard that from the president, because it didn't seem just addressed at Republicans in this case. It felt a little bit like it may be addressed to another person on that podium, President Obama. You hear a lot of complaints about partisanship from both sides in Washington right now.
I was surprised, though. I mean, there are two other living presidents, President George W. Bush and President George H.W. Bush. President George H.W. Bush, Bush 41, whom I covered, had a very strong record in civil rights. I was wondering why he wasn't there.
You know, another person who was not there was Senator Tim Scott, Republican from South Carolina, says he was not invited to come speak. He says this day should be about remembering Dr. King and John Lewis, but there are a lot of conservative blogs right now saying that he should have been
invited to speak. For what reason?
That's another issue. But there are blogs saying that he should have been there.
Well, he could have been invited because he was in South Carolina, which is one of the
he's one of 50,
states.
He's one of 50 senators, and he's appointed, not elected.
All right. We'll leave it
Still
there.
get a phone
Dwayne
call.
Wickham, Clinton Yates, Michelle Martin, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it today.